time. The cut's too deep. Too much greed. Not enough of her to go around. She lay in an alley bleeding into the gutter. Broadway Street beckoned just a few feet away, cars and people passing by, all of them taking to the night in an effort to find some sort of reprieve from the oppressive summer heat. Not that Magnolia could feel the heat. A chill washed over her blood as her blood washed over the warm alley asphalt. Magnolia wanted to scream for help, but she couldn't lift her head. A piece of broken glass cut deep into her right cheek. She smelled garbage and decay. Her black hair stuck to the sticky ground in wild strands. Her body just ignored her when she told it to stand up and crawl out of the alley. She thought about her mother and father. Everybody in her family loved her, and she knew that. She'd always been loved and well-liked at school. She used to have so many friends and loved ones. Magnolia knew they would miss her. Please don't blame anybody but me, she told their images in her mind. You were all good to me. I chose this life. I chose this path. White dots began to dance in her vision. Her head swam. She knew death came for her, yet she had no fear of dying. The young girl felt at peace for the first time in years. Magnolia closed her eyes, content to die. Christ on a crutch, Magnolia! The deep voice shattered the peace that death had brought her. Magnolia's eyes fluttered open. She looked up into the gruff face of Nicholas Goldman. His brown eyes shot at her a look of mixed compassion and dismay. His bushy salt and pepper eyebrows and mustache arched, framing his round red nose. His eyelids and cheeks looked perpetually swollen from too many years of hard drinking and hard living. Detective, Magnolia croaked. Where am I? Hospital, he grimaced, but you really should be in heaven or hell right about now. As if in answer to her question, Magnolia's senses slowly returned. She heard the rhythmic beeping of her vitals being monitored. She could smell the antiseptic in the hospital's dry air. An IV bag hung above her bed, the line dangling from her arm. Her head hurt, ringing with the sound of 1,000 cicadas on crystal meth. You probably feel like shit. You lost lots of blood, the detective said. The docs can't even believe you pulled through. I feel like shit because I need a hit of voodoo dust, Magnolia wanted to say. Instead, she said, How long? You've been out for 2 days. 2 days? She had to get out of here. She needed a hit of dust before her head exploded. Magnolia tried to sit up. Her arms and legs felt like pudding and a sharp pain ripped through her stomach. I warned you this might happen, Magnolia. I warned you that the only thing a bleeder ever gets is dead. That's not what happened, she tried to explain. Don't lie to me, Maggie. I saw the bite marks. Nick, you need to get off that shit and get your ass back to school. Fuck school. If your mama heard your mouth, Magnolia... Did you call my parents? Magnolia asked, feeling her stomach twist with more than just the pain of needing another hit of voodoo dust. Despite the past she found herself wandering now, she managed some meager bit of dignity. She couldn't stand to see her parents now, didn't want to cause them any more pain than she already had. They were good people who didn't deserve what she had put them through. Nick sighed, stepping back in the bed, pretending to interpret the readings on the monitoring equipment. Would it do any good to call them? Probably not, Magnolia said, managing a pained smile. The detective pulled up a battered plastic chair and sat down, all 6 feet, 300-pound frame. All of his 6 feet, 300-pound frame straining the thing to its limit. I'm rounding up the usual low-life assholes to find out who left you to die in that alley. Nick, you can't. The act of bleeding is illegal. Hell, being a bleeder is just as illegal. I should throw your ass in the tank when you get out of here. Maybe a couple of weeks in jail would detox you and clear that addled head of yours. Magnolia smiled weakly. You know, the minute I got out, I'd just be back in the dust. Detox has never worked for me. I know. Nick leaned forward with a crate of plastic. What are we going to do with you, Maggie? Please, Nick, don't arrest any of those vampires. They'll think I turned them in. I'll be as good as dead in Deadtown. Detective Goldman grabbed the rail of the bed. Magnolia, if you spend one more day on that junk, if you spend one more night in Deadtown, you are as good as dead. That's the introduction to Magnolia, the Voodoo Dust Addict. Chapter 2, The Sixth Sin. Doug hated the taste of brains. He fucking loathed the way they tasted, like spongy liver, fetid tripe, like the wasted moments of dreams unfulfilled. But goddamn if the taste of brains wasn't the only thing that really tamed the endless hunger gnawing at Doug's belly. He could eat flesh, organs, muscle, and bone, but those 6 tables barely satiated the ravenous desire that occupied every ticking talk of every minute of his life. Brains, 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 brains. Doug couldn't stand them. Doug couldn't get enough of them. The real problem was, nobody really wanted someone to eat his or her brains. Even the lowly undead wannabes that came into Club Juju didn't want anyone munching on their memories or thoughts. That thing that separated them from all of the other monkeys. He sat at the table and watched the early evening regulars as wannabes walked across the smoke-filled dance floor. The floor was empty and the sound system quiet. The DJ hadn't arrived, and nobody ever bothered to drop a dime into the jukebox. The club owner hadn't changed the music since 1983. If Doug had to hear another Huey Lewis song, or Come On Feel the Noise one more time, he swore he'd eat his own brains and end it all. No brains, no pain? Nope. No brains, no eternity. Something about destroying your mind simply snuffed out even death. Getting your brain fried dropped any of the undead wannabes in their tracks. So consequently, trying to eat some wannabe's brain became a real turnoff for those trying to cheat death. Without a mind, nobody lived forever. Not for the first time, Doug seriously considered letting someone put a bullet in his head and checking out of this world for good. But Doug was too much of a coward. That yellow streak, that fear of dying, is what got him into the situation in the first place. Too damned afraid to really live, so freaked out about not knowing what waits on the other side of death's door, Doug walked into Club Juju, like so many other idiots, hoping to cheat death, hoping for eternal life. He got his wish, but he had hope for something better than this. He hoped, he fantasized that some big-breasted, blood-sucking vixen would grant him his wish. Becoming a vampire looked so chic. At worst, Doug figured he'd find eternity as a goal, a shifter, or even a disciple of the Watch. He had heard that those guys in the Watch had found the secrets to immortality without being undead. Doug never expected to be stuck in this shitty world as a shambling zombie. Just my luck, he thought. Those words had been his mantra for quite a few years. He looked around the place. The Club Juju was mostly empty at this time of night. A few young wannabes huddled together in a corner booth, too unsure of themselves to engage with any of the undead. The new vampire in town, the one with the high fade and turquoise leather jacket that told Doug the Bat had been turned sometime shortly after the owner stopped changing jukebox music, sat at the bar doing his best "I'm too cool for y'all" act. A few bar stools over, a drunk danger seeker flirted with Marie Laveau, just looking to get his shit cursed. The poor sap that got zombified a couple weeks ago was sitting at his table, mumbling under his breath with shattered vocal cords about the love at first sight and his one true soulmate. The only time Doug saw him get up from that table was to feed. Then the sap would wander outside for a bit, looking up and down the street before returning to the club, sitting back down and mumbling once again. Dumbass. Who could ever really say what motivates someone to come into a place like the Juju? Doug knew why he came. He was a coward and feared death. But come to the Juju for true love? What a moron. I had to eat your brains just to teach you a lesson. Of course, that lesson would teach Doug what most of the undead already knew. To prey on your own kid only gets you permanently dead. Dead flesh corrupted the undead. Withered them from the inside out like Ebola virus on steroids. So that option is out, Doug decided. Back to square one. Brains, brains, brains. I gotta eat me some brains, and I gotta eat me some brains real soon. And that's the introduction to the second lead character. Doug the zombie who does not want to be a zombie anymore, but is too afraid to die. Chapter 4 is the introduction to the third and final misfit of Dead Town. Chapter 4 is entitled Roadhouse Blues. Roadhouse could smell trouble in the air. Not the usual Saturday night drunken douchebag kind of trouble, real trouble. The kind where somebody somewhere would wind up dead, broken, or bleeding badly. In a place like the Club Juju, dead or bleeding came with the territory. Tonight something in the air felt different to the lead bouncer everybody called Roadhouse. The tall Hawaiian had learned to listen to that little voice in his head, that intuition, which had just come naturally as long as he could remember. Whenever he ignored that voice, he always regretted it. Whatever happened tonight would be bad for him, bad for the club, just plain bad. He left the door attended by one of his better bouncers, Adam. Making his way into the loud club, Roadhouse stopped by the bar, folded his massive arms against his chest, and surveyed Club Juju for any signs of trouble. The place rocked tonight. The dance floor was packed to its limits. Every bar stool and booth filled with party people. Roadhouse saw the usual mix of clubgoers, undead wannabes, zombies, vampires, a couple of warlocks and witches, all intermingling, partying like this was the end of days. Of course, if the end of days happened tonight, then the disciples of the watch had failed in their mission, and Roadhouse ought to stop worrying about potential trouble brewing and join all these crazy people in a drink or two. Not tonight. Roadhouse knew the end wasn't nigh, but he felt the pit of his stomach that something bad definitely tainted the air, like the stink of a 3-day dead zombie. The bouncer began scanning the club, trusting his intuition to pick out the trouble in the crowd. 2 vampire girls worked some man in a cheap business suit at one of the booths. One of the girls had his hand inside her dress shirt, striking his chest. The other teased him with a tongue into his ear. He had his eyes closed, one hand wrapped around a bottle of Bud, the other holding a pen above some paperwork. The dumb fuck had brought a standard Form 1313 contract with him. Outside of Deadtown, a contract like that had some legal merit to it, guaranteeing the businessman his right to immortality and in life in exchange for his blood. Here in Deadtown, the laws didn't apply the same. If you came into a place like Club Juju, you put your own life at risk. Everybody knew that. If you didn't know, then you got what you deserved. The guy had a wedding band on. He probably had no intention of turning his wife. He would just leave her to wither with old age and die, thinking he would spend an eternity with a hot little piece of ass like the 2 about to drain him dry. More than likely, the cops would find the businessman's body dumped in some alley in the morning. He would be dead, the girls too greedy for his blood to share the gift or curse of their immortality. No, not the trouble I'm picking up, Roadhouse decided. What I'm sensing is something much bigger. He kept looking over the club. A nervous shapeshifter showed off to some girls in one corner of the dance floor, effortlessly willing his body to flow from human to half cat, back to human, back to cat again, and then back to human, his flesh rippling like living clay. No trouble there. That guy just wanted to get laid. Roadhouse let his eyes pass over the lovelorn zombie he turned a couple weeks ago, and then brought them back quickly to the morose bastard. He had gotten so used to seeing the guy, the zombie had become one of the permanent fixtures in the club, and Roadhouse almost didn't notice the return of the zombie chick that had made the guy one of the living dead in the first place. She had told Roadhouse to let the guy know she'd be back, but the bouncer really never believed her. Yet, there they were, looking longingly into each other's undead eyes. Something's so wrong here. Not in the usual sense of, man, that's just wrong, but in the sense that had Roadhouse's little voice starting up again. His intuition slapped him hard in the face. Whatever went wrong tonight would start right there with those 2 decaying lovebirds. Moving closer to the end of the bar, Roadhouse watched the 2 with wary eyes. Then something else caught his attention just at the end of the bar a couple stools away. Now his little voice really shouted at him, warned him to watch out for the guy sitting on the last bar stool nursing a pint of dark beer. To the untrained eye, the guy looked normal enough. Blue jeans, biker boots, and a tank top to keep the heat at bay. His hair was long and a bit shaggy. The man tapped his right boot rapidly with nervous energy on the chrome tube running the length of the bar as a footrest. His old body seemed barely contained and an exuberance waiting to be unleashed. Although the club's air conditioning worked overtime to ward off the summer's heat wave outside, sweat dripped from the guy's forehead like a salted river. The man gave his undivided attention to the zombie lovers. He watched them closely like they were the most interesting people in the club. He didn't give a shit about the half-naked hooker sitting next to him. He didn't care about the fact that a fly buzzed incessantly around his sweaty head. Roadhouse suspected something about this guy, but he decided on a closer look before jumping to conclusions. Making his way down the bar, the bouncer walked casually past the man, glancing sideways at him as he continued to the far side of the club. Roadhouse spotted what he expected to find on the back of the man's right hand, the one wrapped around the beer. A glyph had been tattooed on his hand, a complex magical design tattooed in a mix of blood and indigo ink. Roadhouse reached the other side of the bar, turned, putting his back to the wall. He folded his arms again, still with a clear view of the zombie lovers and the guy at the bar. Whoever or whatever the man had been before didn't matter now. He was no longer a man, just a vessel, and a meat puppet for the demon bound within his flesh. Roadhouse knew that why his inner voice had been so loud. The demon belonged to the disciples of the Watch. The glyph told him that the Watch had summoned this demon and bound him to their service. Whatever that service might be, the bouncer had no idea. He just knew that the demon's mission brought him here and had something to do with the zombie lovers. Roadhouse really didn't care what the Watch might be up to, but he didn't want any trouble in his nightclub. And that's the introduction to Roadhouse. Eventually, all three of these misfits, the zombie who's afraid of death but no longer wants to live, or live the undead life, voodoo dust addict, who has lost her way in life, and Roadhouse, who is a bouncer in the seediest club in town, their paths will find each other, and they will be on their path to discovering what the disciples of the Watch are actually up to.